Story 1. I work in healthcare, and one of my patients told me she sleeps more peacefully at night knowing I am there. This will never leave me. Story 2. The final walkthrough inspector told me that if my name is on the job, he simply signs off on it because I am a perfectionist and he can concentrate on jobs he knows are likely to be trouble. Story 3. I know you're overwhelmed and stressed, but you are holding it together and keeping going. This was about working in the part of the kitchen where I had no experience. Story 4. I was told I always had a lovely smile and seemed so happy. I cried afterward because I hated that place, but I worked with children and people with disabilities, so it was nice to know they did not know I hated it there, laughing my ass off. Story 5. My boss's boss told me that my shift reports are so thorough that he printed one and brought it to the other houses as an example of what shift reports should look like. That made me proud. Story 6. You do noticeably less work than anyone else employed here, and you give the impression that you do not actually want to be here. Story 7. I actually had this written on one of my yearly evaluations. You are an asshole, but without you our group would not be nearly as productive and successful as it has been. Story 8. A teenage girl and her mother were dining at the restaurant where I worked at the time. Her mother told me that her daughter said I reminded her of a music television video girl. I was not sure what that meant, so I asked. The daughter said I had a lot of confidence. I think about this all the time. Story 9. I was promoted twice, a total of 4 years earlier than expected. I doubled my income in 3 years instead of the scheduled 7. Story 10. I was a snowcat operator and the only woman on my team. My boss came up to me and said I was schooling the others. Story 11. A couple of months ago someone told me I am a good leader and an asset to the company, and that they would hate to lose me. That would mean more if last year I had received more than 40 cents an hour and if I had actually received a raise this year. My resume is out there, and the moment I get a higher paying job I am done. Story 12. My presence reduces anxiety because I inspire confidence that problems will be solved. Story 13. I'm a pretty hairy guy and I'm Italian. So one day I decided to do something about it. I shaved my entire body from head to toe. I was smooth as a dolphin. The next day at work, my boss told me he had never seen such an unusual-looking person before. He said he was very impressed with the initiative I took to improve my appearance. It made me feel really good about myself. Story 14. I was about 13, working at my first job in a restaurant. It was my second day, and a customer told me I was doing an incredible job. I cried. Story 15. You are the best boss I have ever had, having worked with you 5 or 6 times across multiple postings. Story 16. Community mental health nurse, you are my best parole officer ever. Story 17. They used to tell me that they needed to learn how to clone me. It made me feel good. Now, after the business collapsed, I realized they said it because I never complained about the terrible working conditions and the long, exhausting hours. Story 18. I had a very average paying job managing people and assets. I emailed, politely asking for a pay review, no demands, because I was covering another role and my workload was unreasonable. In 2 weeks, I included 3 levels of management on the email, including the owner's son-in-law, who was the chief operating officer, and I received no reply. I handed in my notice. My boss was shocked, but there was no action or rebuttal. 6 months later, I found out they needed to hire 3 people to pick up my workload, and my boss created a new position to dump work onto, which he had previously done to me. Finding out they needed for people to cover what I had been doing, and that the business still was not performing as well as during my time, was all the compliment I needed. Story 19. That was a simple comment, but it saved the general contractor a headache. I am a plumbing subcontractor. I took pictures of a gas valve in a wall, complete with measurements, because I assumed the drywall crew would cover it. A few months later, the general contractor called asking for an idea to reroute the gas line and valve. They could not remember where it was and could not continue with the new custom fireplace mantle until they knew its exact location. They did not want to damage the drywall looking for it. I sent him the photos. He replied that it was smart in a genuine, grateful tone. Story 20. My former boss at my company told me before I switched shifts that I was a badass employee and to keep that up. He told me to show those on the first shift that I am. He said I had some bumps along the way but had persevered quite nicely and that he was proud of me. It felt great to hear what I already knew about myself because my work speaks for me and my dad did the same. Story 21. I worked in customer support for Verizon. A customer called about his bill. I took him through it step by step. When we were done, he said, "Your husband is a lucky man." Story 22. As a basketball referee officiating a high-level junior game that ended very close, the losing coach told us we had done a fantastic job. It is rare enough to receive a compliment, but one from the losing coach is basically unheard of. It absolutely made my day. Story 23. I was told recently that I did not get a role on a team I thought I was underqualified for. I did not hear back for 2 weeks. Then the hiring manager called and said she had been talking about me the whole time. Her concern was that I would outgrow the role and be too good for the team after 6 months, so she was opening a leadership role at a higher level for me to move into. Going from thinking I did not get the role to being told they liked me so much they wanted me in a better position was surreal. Story 24. When I introduced myself to the chairman of the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, she smiled and said, "I know who you are." Story 25. In a previous role, I worked in procurement for a multinational company and hosted potential Chinese suppliers on site visits. After one visit, I shared some photos with the Shanghai office and received this email. "In the photo, you are so handsome that our colleagues said you could get ahead based on your looks, perhaps become a model in the fashion industry, and need not be an engineer." Haha, that still gives me a warm, fuzzy feeling. Story 26. I was a young developer who was going through some issues with the boss. I showed him how I had solved a problem, and he just said, "Ooh, you're good." I still get a warm feeling about that. Story 27. I am a mason and specialize in the repair of 1700s and 1800s brick walls. I had a meeting with a heritage architect and the owners of this particular job. Everyone looked at the wall in question and had to pull up their emails to see the before images. Nobody could tell where the repairs had been made. The new work blended seamlessly with the existing brickwork. They all came closer and spoke quietly out of my hearing, and the architect said, "Good work, Billinky Bill. High praise indeed from this very particular man. He gives me most of my work now. I don't even have to provide quotes. I just submit the invoices." Story 28. My team, you take the time to explain things to us and why they are done that way instead of just telling us what to do like other managers. It is good to know the team appreciated the extra effort. Story 29. I was an aerospace parts buyer. One of our salespeople called me the best buyer in the industry. That was pretty high praise. Story 30. I am one of a couple of reserve staff. I would be one of the last to be let go because I am such a workhorse. Story 31. At my end-of-year appraisal in 2022, I was praised for over 30 minutes by my boss. She then told me I could not stay and encouraged me to find something better with my life. That made me think about my future. I stayed a little longer because I needed steady income to pay for my cat's medical treatment, then began working out a new path. I am now pursuing a locksmithing apprenticeship and could not be more excited. Story 32. Some of my favorites have been 1. You are a unicorn in a world of donkeys. 2. Grateful for the way your brain works, said the executive director in a room full of directors. 3. It is visible and highly positive that you are not just a seat warmer, said my new subordinates. I love my job. Story 33. Many people told me I was the best boss they had ever had, which was flattering because I spent the entire time panicking with imposter syndrome. Story 34. I'm a support worker. When clients call the office and request me, it gives me a warm feeling. Story 35. I took a week of leave. When I returned, my boss said that it was stressful without me and thanked me for coming back. Story 36. It is a shame you decided to quit. If you ever return, we would gladly welcome you with open arms. Story 37. One of the technicians who used to fix our equipment told me I should apply to their company because I was better with the equipment than some of their staff. I sometimes think I should have taken him up on that. The pay was better, but repairing broken equipment can be incredibly frustrating and stressful, especially when you know the problem was caused by an operator who does not know what they are doing, which is the case for half of my coworkers. Story 38. Every time I walk back here, you are never working, yet somehow all your key performance indicators are the highest on our team. I work really hard for 2 hours a day and then relax, laughing out loud. Story 39. My boss told someone that I could read her mind. She said we did not need to talk because I knew exactly what needed to be done and that our office was very quiet because of my supposed mind reading. I could not read her mind, but I was flattered because she knew I was competent at my job, especially since it was a Japanese company where efficiency is highly prized. Story 40. I have severe social anxiety, but somehow I ended up working at a call center, speaking to hundreds of people every day. I hated the sound of my voice and thought I was terrible, but my supervisors kept telling me I was one of the most charming, well-spoken employees they were very disappointed when I eventually quit because of burnout. One woman I was interviewing over the phone told me I should smile more because she could hear the change in my voice and said it was lovely. As a man, that was nice to hear. I laughed out loud. Story 41. I love your dimples. They really make your smile shine. I had been feeling really bad about my looks lately, and hearing that brought a huge smile to my face. It made me happy for the rest of my shift. Story 42. Not work. School. A boy in my year group told me a few years ago that I sounded surprised whenever I said, "Thank you." That comment has stuck with me. Story 43. We hired you by mistake, but it was the best mistake we ever made. I'm not sure how to feel about that. This happened at the 5-year mark, and I had never been given the impression that my hiring was accidental. Story 44. You are amazing. He said this after we saved his dog's life. Story 45. Silence. If the boss does not need to say anything on the two-way radio, it means I am free to continue as I am. Story 46. Hey, you look like one of the better chippies on this crew, but sober and stronger. Turns out I've known the guy for years. He used to be my boss. Small world. Story 47. My manager kept telling me I am a badass in a good way when I did a good job. Story 48. I have your next mission because you're the only one brave enough to actually like going into the mystery rooms. Get in there and find Narnia. Crazy Coraline Girl. Story 49. When I worked as a nursing aide at each facility I went to, supervisors argued with each other to have me on their floor. I appreciate the vote of confidence, but I was doing the bare minimum, which in New Jersey nursing homes was somehow considered above and beyond. Story 50. At a large law firm, my colleague who worked at the service desk told me that I had 0 complaints online from internal or external stakeholders, and that I was holding a position intended for 2 people. Story 51. I went from being an assistant unnoticed and with no work to do, to becoming the property manager of 100 high-end properties. I was going to move on, but they recognized my potential. It is a great workplace, the best I have ever worked at, and I felt very appreciated after a major restructuring. Story 52. And by best, I mean hilarious yet totally inappropriate, laughing out loud. You look very nice today. I'm sure you look nice with nothing on, too. Story 53. Female colleagues voted me the winner for Best Visible Outline in Khaki Pants. Story 54. My boss received several phone calls from the executive committee complimenting me after I gave a presentation to secure funding for a project. Story 55. An old coworker whom I still speak with on the phone weekly told me that my singing voice reminded them of Shiloh Dynasty. If you have heard her, you know what a massive compliment that is. Even if it is not entirely accurate, it felt great. Story 56. A couple of years ago, I was working many shifts at a place, and the boss said he should pitch a tent at the back for me because I was there all the time. I do not know whether it was a compliment or if he thought I was a fool. Story 57. I was told I was charismatic by an old chief when I was in the Navy. Nobody liked him, but I was still very surprised and happy with that feedback. Story 58. A former leader high in the chain of command called my project the single most important project delivered all year, despite colleagues above and below me giving no acknowledgement for the work. Story 59. I received a genuine pat on the back when a supervisor came by and saw the work I had accomplished. It was a very loud environment with earplugs and earmuffs for hearing protection. Story 60. How come we do not hear anything about you or your account? Well, it is because I make sure there is nothing to complain about. Here is another from early in my career on the information technology help desk for a global firm. My boss called me into a meeting saying he had listened to a call. He could not figure out how I turned the call around after identifying the problem and fixing the issue in about 1 minute with just a couple of questions. Story 61. You are a powerhouse. There was more context to this, and it made me feel great. Story 62. A patient told me that seeing my beautiful smile made them feel better. Another patient said I had a fat bottom just like Elizabeth Taylor. It was meant as an insult, but I took it as a compliment and thanked her. Story 63. A photograph of me with my pants down at the photocopier was pinned to the notice board for over 12 months. A company record. Story 64. Students say I am a very good teacher and that they had a good day with me. Story 65. I am a rock star, which means I pick up the slack for other people and do not get paid enough. Story 66. I was told I'm as useful as a knitted condom. If anything, it's a compliment on how well I can fuck something up because I'm on a streak right now. Story 67. Hide your arms, one of the customers said. They were allergic to mussels. Story 68. I'm a teacher. I butted heads with a student all year about behavior and implemented many forms of consequences. I tried not to let it affect how I approached teaching them. They passed, but not by much. They said they wanted to repeat the course. I said they should do it with another teacher, but they said no. They wanted me again. Surprised, I asked why. They said it was because I cared about them and how they did. I think that was the best compliment I could receive. Story 69. I know we have unlimited paid time off here, but you take 2 weeks more than everyone else. Story 70. Good job. If you keep it up like this, I can buy another house next year. Story 71. You have beautiful skin. That was so random. Laughing out loud. I didn't even get to thank her. Story 72. I was a huge fan of this rapper. They reached out to me and said they liked my music. Story 73. You are the subject matter expert in how processing can go wrong. I laughed out loud. Story 74. A manager told another manager about me. Do not take away my best worker. Story 75. I worked as a waiter in a restaurant. One time I asked an older woman, about 70 to 80 years old, if she could give me her empty plate because my arms were not long enough. I was trying to make a joke. She replied, "What about your penis?" I was shocked, but I answered that no one had complained. She just winked at me. It was a bit weird. Story 76. I was going through some personal issues and became quite depressed. It affected my productivity at work, so I decided to be honest and let my team know so they could plan projects around me and not be blindsided. My director told me not to worry, saying my reduced productivity was still better than other employees' regular output. They also supported me in other ways. My issues are resolved now, and I am still working there. Story 77. An excellent pharmacist said to me, "When you speak, people listen." I am now retraining to be a high school teacher. Story 78. I work in employment for people with disabilities and supervise a warehouse. An educational assistant who accompanied a young person on work experience told me it was a nice atmosphere and did not feel like a sweatshop. Story 79. My tattoos mean nothing, but I enjoy talking about them with clients when they ask. Story 80. Emergency veterinary medicine worker here. A client brought in a young dog that had been hit by a car and had a poor prognosis. I walked them through the euthanasia process, explained aftercare and urn selection, and reviewed any extras they wanted, such as clay paw prints, photo urns, and nameplates. The whole visit lasted 4 to 5 hours from arrival to departure. The owners spent time with their dog before saying goodbye. The older female owner, who seemed to be in her early 60s, flagged me down in the treatment area. We had the dog on oxygen, and additional technicians, besides myself, were ready to begin cardiopulmonary resuscitation if the dog arrested. She grabbed my hand and said, "Thank you for being kind and strong. I wish we had met when my dog was not dying. I appreciate when someone says thank you, but we rarely hear it in veterinary medicine unless you are the veterinarian." It was nothing special, but having someone on the worst day of their life thank me for doing my job is why I do this work and why I love it. Story 81. My boss recommended that I take a higher position because he needs someone who will not mess it up. Story 82. I provide excellent telephone service. Our customers would always ask for me because my customer service was of a high standard. I was nominated for a staff award. No, I do not work in a brothel or a call center. Story 83. If you are involved, then everyone knows it will be okay. You are the best I have ever seen at presenting the data. You understand this business better than most people here. I also received some backhanded remarks and a written warning, so there were insults to offset the compliments. Story 84. I recently left for a new job, and having several people tell me during my final weeks that there is always a spot for me if I want to return really took the cake. Story 85. I was temporarily covering a position. They created a new role to keep me. Story 86. I was on secondment. I had been in the role about 3 weeks of a 3-month secondment when my boss asked when it would end. I told him, and he said there was nothing wrong with my work but that I had done my old role too well and they needed me back there. I enjoyed the secondment role much more, so I told him I could quickly change how I handled my old role. They appointed me permanently to the secondment role. Story 87. My team and I were the example for all the other stores in our area. Story 88. I work in an aged care facility. After giving eye drops to one of the residents, he said, "No offense to your coworkers, but I used to manage people back in the United Kingdom, and you just stand out from the rest of them." Story 89. I have heard someone gossip about everyone here except you. Everyone likes you. This is a true miracle because I am weird. Story 90. I do not have any more tasks for you. You work too fast. Go get a coffee or something. Story 91. I was third in charge when I left the job because of toxic management. 3 weeks later, the district manager called me and offered me the manager's job. They realized who actually got things done and fired the manager and assistant manager. Story 92. My boss sold a multi-million-dollar business to me with a vendor finance arrangement. He had enough confidence in me to think I could grow the business and pay off that debt. He is a very smart man, so that is easily the biggest career compliment I have ever received. Story 93. The CEO was outside talking to other people, saw me, left the conversation, came over, gave me a hug, and said it was the best outcome from a project I had led that she had experienced. It made the long hours worthwhile. Story 94. My cohorts and I were treated equally, and in the 6 months I have been there, I have done more than some have done in 15 years of employment. Story 95. Recently, in my aged care placement, a bedridden man told me I was a breath of fresh air. Story 96. You have been here long enough that, per company policy, I am compelled to give you 5 cents per hour as a raise. Story 97. I'm an English teacher at a high school in Japan. I coach students in a yearly English speech contest. One girl I teach is on the autism spectrum. She's good at English. Her parents have had her in a cram school with extra English conversation lessons since elementary school. Her particular form of autism influences her character, and she is perceived as aloof and distant by her classmates, so she is mostly friendless. I asked her to try the contest as something she could focus on and put her energy into. We worked a long time together creating a speech based on her passion for music. She then toiled away at memorizing it and perfecting pronunciation, intonation, and prosody. On the day of the contest, when we arrived, she confessed, "My head wants to run away." Doubt began to invade my thoughts, and I started to second-guess myself and question whether it was a good idea to put this student, who had been labeled special, on a stage in front of an audience. What if she melted down? That would be my responsibility. I told her not to listen to her head and just follow her heart. She performed quite well. She skipped a portion, and that may be why she was awarded second place. When they announced her name as runner-up, she almost jumped out of her seat. "That's me." They said my name. I won second. She went up, accepted her award, and, in her own reserved way, clearly showed the joy and excitement she felt. Afterwards, as we were leaving the auditorium carrying her ribbon and plaque, she couldn't stop talking about it. I won this award. I was second in the contest. I got a prize. I let her run on and bask in the moment, chuckling as we crossed the parking lot. Then she said it. I've never won anything before. Technically, this isn't a compliment to me. I don't even factor into that statement. But I'll take it as one, and I will turn to it when I need my spirits lifted or when I feel like just another cog in the wheel. She reminded me that I'm not, nor are any of us. Story 98. A written reference I have from 12 years ago from my manager when I had to move interstate for family reasons reads that losing insert my name is like losing my right hand. I am sure I will get by without her, but nowhere near as well as I do with her. Story 99. I am a teacher. I received an email from my principal that a family had sent to the entire front office. They were moving away and said they wished they could pack me in their moving truck and that I was a once-in-a-lifetime teacher that parents hope their children get. I cried like a baby. Their son was autistic and almost entirely nonverbal at the start of the year. He came incredibly far, and I am still so proud of him. Story 100. I have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and my old boss told me I was the most organized person he knew. Last year, I missed a major fashion event because I caught the coronavirus 2 days before it started. I worried they might prefer to bring back the person who replaced me this year. Instead, the management team told me how much they had missed me. They said the seamstress who replaced me did not fully understand what the job entailed, and no one could explain what I did, because I simply show up and get on with the work every season. I was told that if I ever decide to retire, and I hope that is not soon, I will need to train a replacement beforehand because I am irreplaceable. Story 101. Finally, someone who knows what they are doing. You are a saint. Thank you. You made my whole week. Story 102. While finishing a regular clean at the home of a severely physically disabled senior woman, her family, who were staying with her for the holiday season, stopped me to say how thankful they were and how much of an impact our cleaning has. She kept stressing that we make a difference. Felt very nice. Most people do not even notice us vacuuming under their feet. Story 103. I messaged an old coworker and friend to whom I used to report directly. She replied that she was filling out my reference report and it made her miss me even more. She said they do not have employees like me anymore and that she hopes they appreciate me as much as she does. Her message made me tear up. I miss her for real. Story 104. A woman asked if my breasts were real and said she had just had her implants removed. So I guess she was complimenting them. Story 105. I used to work in insurance in a call center. The best compliment is when a customer specifically asks for me because they know and trust that I know what I am doing. Story 106. I am an executive assistant to 2 high-ranking officials. It is generally a thankless job, but one of my bosses told me, I really could not do anything without you. You are the most crucial part of this team. That still makes me smile. Story 107. Hey, I did not know you still work here. That is a compliment because it means my effort to fly under the radar is working perfectly. Story 108. I was introduced to a group of city councilors, and one of them said, yes, she is famous in our city. Story 109. I was referred to as the miracle worker. Whenever I had a crazy idea, it was usually industry-changing or ingenious. Story 110. I am a certified nursing assistant and work in long-term care. One of my nurse managers was on her angel rounds, making sure patients receive care and all interventions are in place. And she told me that when I am on shift, she never has to worry about our tube-feeding patients because they are always safe and properly cared for. Story 111. I was told I am the go-to person for getting things done, which made me very happy. Story 112. Once, I was asked to leave a meeting because I was not good at lying, so they did not want me to hear the rest of their discussion. I took it as a great compliment. Story 113. I was leaving a company, and someone much more senior said to me, you made me better at my job. It was very sincere, although I still hated that place. Story 114. I run many small workshops with leaders. I often struggle to know whether I sound authentic. I ran a particularly challenging workshop with my boss, her peers, and my boss's boss. I received feedback that it felt like an intimate members-only club where everyone had a place. You knew us back to front, and you kept us perfectly on track. Story 115. I was hired for my personality over similarly skilled candidates because the team needed a lift in enthusiasm. That was 2 years ago, and I was told I had been a breath of fresh air. As someone with low self-esteem, I gushed. Story 116. When I worked in employment services, I saw a coworker's client while she was sick. The client asked to be switched to my caseload. I also saw another client's cousin for an appointment. He said his cousin had told him about me and had praised my work. That was very positive feedback for that industry. In disability supports, multiple clients have told me I am the best support worker they have had. Clients have said I am on the ball and not afraid of a challenge. A coworker who had to cover one of my shifts with a client facing significant challenges told me they did not know how I did it. During an education placement, I was told I am exactly what the industry needs and to prepare a curriculum vitae. A student told my assessor she had to pass me because I was so good. A child from a class I was in told me I was her favorite teacher, even though I am not a teacher. Story 117. I worked as a children's community behavioral case manager. The assistant principal once said, "You must get all the fun ones." I replied with a smile, "Yes, I do. I loved the fun ones and prided myself on seeing the best in students whom teachers, administrators, and parents were frustrated with. Those were the students I felt were misunderstood, and being the self-styled Mary Poppins to kids who acted out meant a lot to me. Supporting students by playfully annoying them to defuse situations was the best part. I welcomed every eye roll. My dad jokes and funny accents were worth it. I wanted to show that learning can be fun. I used to play, "Did you know?" A kid was kicking the wall. "Did you know an ostrich's eye is bigger than its brain? Oh my gosh. Stop. Nope. Did you know?" Story 118. Being told thank you, you are back as the first thing when I return from holiday is disappointing, but it is nice to know people missed me. Story 119. I am the best hire they had ever made, except last week they told me that I might have been overtaken by a recent hire. Story 120. When I left my last workplace, I gave 8 weeks notice because I knew organizational changes were coming that would need to be made. By the time my last day arrived, 9 other employees had resigned or retired because they did not want to work there after I left. Story 121. I received 2 recently. One of my employees thanked me for being an understanding and helpful manager. My manager complimented me on my typing. Story 122. Over the past 2 months, I faced the risk of redundancy. I managed to secure a role in the new structure, and someone told me I was a highly desirable colleague. It made me feel that others had fought for me to stay and would want me on their team if I did not get the new role. Story 123. I'm an 18-year-old woman working when a middle-aged man asked for help finding a particular item. He came up to me and said, "I'm looking for a wench." He immediately realized what he had said and apologized profusely. I just laughed while he corrected himself, explaining he meant a winch for his trailer. I thought I would share this because I found it funny. Story 124. Multiple customers told me I was doing a great job and that they had spoken to the store manager. I never heard anything from management, but I always heard from them when I did something wrong. Hearing praise directly from a customer felt nice. Story 125. I work with nonverbal children. A parent said to me, "I've never had someone work so well with my children. Because of you, we wake up every day excited for school." Story 126. I felt invisible. I never received awards or recognition, but I got things done and tried to make it a better place. One day my second in command told me he noticed the way I helped people, how I was always there with a kind word and how I could smooth over upsets. He said they would never give me anything for it, but he saw what I did. I went back to my office and became teary-eyed. It meant a lot. Story 127. A bittersweet situation. They told me I was very good at my job and deserved higher pay, but they could not pay me and were letting me go. 3 years later, they still had not replaced me because I was worth what they were paying and they could not find someone as capable. Story 128. That I looked like a henchman that was killed early in Die Hard. This is the greatest compliment I have ever received. Story 129. If this country were ever taken, you would be one of the first to be shot. Story 130. Your performance is beyond reproach, said my former manager. Story 131. Your calm demeanor keeps the team steady during stressful situations. Story 132. A junior colleague, after a conference call in which we had to scold a barrister, said they felt like a child thinking that was what they wanted to be when they grew up. Story 133. You are a jinx. I have not won since you came here. Story 134. Considering a former coworker and her mother hit on me twice, I'd say that's a compliment. Story 135. People constantly tell my boss I'm a doll and that they love me. Last Thursday, a woman said she was keeping me, and my boss replied, "Too bad. She's mine." It made my day because I felt like I had been messing up all day. Story 136. Thank you for giving us a few hours with our son while he was still alive. A 15-year-old boy was found pinned between a truck and a fence where I worked, and it was said he had no chance of resuscitation. I was a member of an on-site rescue team, and while very nervous, I managed to resuscitate him. He was airlifted to the hospital, and his parents had the chance to say personal things to him before he passed. Story 137. You're a fuckhead, but I like working for you. This was my favorite from last week, said one of my employees. Story 138. I am the most beautiful girl in the universe. Story 139. This woman from Human Resources walked up to me one day and asked if I wanted to get a pizza and have sex. Story 140. I had a bad boss who was pushed out of the organization and replaced by someone with much more experience and charisma. He has told me I am a thought leader and that I provide high-level insight, often in front of my peers and superiors. He has been hinting at promoting me into a management position. I went from feeling like my ideas meant nothing to seeing them taken seriously and being asked to implement some. When I gave 2 weeks' notice at a previous organization to accept my current position, my boss said, "We will greatly miss you, but I agree with your thought process and think you will be a great addition to that organization. And I would be honest with you if I thought you were not ready." I almost cried. I have been blessed with good bosses in the information technology field. Story 141. You are the only lead I can trust to make this happen. I still feel I do not deserve such a high compliment, but I will give myself some credit. If my team does not understand something the managers have issued, I take it upon myself to understand the manager's viewpoint so I can help my team. If we are all on the same page, the task will be done correctly the first time. Story 142. At my university, I heard through the grapevine that I'm the guy who can teach anything. Many students have been choosing my classes because of me, regardless of the topic. Story 143. I worked in retail selling tools. A customer would come in every few months, shake his head and say, "You're better than this. Why are you still here?" Story 144. I work in aged care and I had a client with dementia. Every time I left, I would hear her say to her daughter, "She is a lovely girl." It meant the world to me because I absolutely loved her, and she was the sweetest old lady you could ever meet. Story 145. When I was a student, I worked as a cashier in a grocery store. I had a regular customer, an older woman who was deaf or hard of hearing and nonverbal. One day she gestured that she wanted to write something down. I gave her a pen, and she wrote on her receipt that I spoke very clearly and never had any trouble understanding me. She must have noticed that I was often worried about whether she understood me. Story 146. A colleague left the company for a very high-paid, short-term job. When the company contacted him to ask if he wanted to return, he said he would only come back if he was on the Unstoppable Roosters team. My team's location was 30 minutes farther, while the other team was only 10 minutes from his house. Story 147. I worked in Canada with an older man who was notoriously grouchy and hostile. When I left, he came around to say goodbye and told me I was the only Australian he did not hate. Story 148. I helped a customer with something. 5 minutes later, he came up to me and said that Jesus loves me and that he felt obligated to tell me. Story 149. As a wedding planner years ago, I became accustomed to couples getting a little unglued as the day approached. That's totally normal. Many of them told me, I was really nervous. But today I was fine because I knew you were in charge of my party. That meant a lot to me. Story 150. Peer recognition during the Chief Executive Officer's company-wide quarterly presentation. Peers nominate colleagues for recognition by sending a brief description of the actions they are acknowledging. The Chief Executive Officer reads these nominations and presents gifts to outstanding nominees. The presentations are recorded and viewed by board members. I have been nominated a few times in a company of nearly 500 employees. It is a nice feeling as someone in technical support, the help desk, and administration. Story 151. A customer once said, "The quality of fresh produce was poor today, but the checkout operator was efficient and not as annoying as usual. I will accept it." Story 152. Is there anything we can do to keep you after you resign? Story 153. At about 5 in the morning on my last day of training at Starbucks, the person in the drive-thru told me she loved my vibe and tipped me $10. It made me so happy. Story 154. You should be the director of operations or vice president. You are much smarter than all the executives and other directors. They are intimidated by you, which is why they give you a hard time and have hindered your chances of advancing in the organization. Story 155. One of my boss's parting words to me after she resigned was, "You make everything you touch better." Story 156. My coworker has told me a couple of times that they wish their son were more like me. Story 157. My boss's boss said, in a meeting with everyone there, that I had done things he needed done before he even asked me to do them. I used to get yelled at in school for doing things like that, so it felt nice to be appreciated. Story 158. Wow, what are you doing here so early? Half an hour late. Story 159. A coworker referred to me and another coworker as Batman and Robin, then whispered to me that I was Batman. Story 160. I was caulking a shower with silicone. It had a strong smell. An older customer walked in, noticed the odor, joked that we must always be high, and said that must be why I look the way I do. Story 161. A customer said I had eyes like black diamonds. Usually customers just say they like my hair. Story 162. A customer told me I reminded him of Margaret Sullivan. Story 163. I was criticized for circling the wagons when asked to allocate new work. I talked with my staff about the implications, figured out what they would have to set aside to take on that work, and generally protected them. That was apparently a bad thing. I took it as a compliment. Story 164. A customer wrote that my singing was noticeable but not unpleasant, and that's likely the highest praise I've ever received at work. Story 165. I am a teacher and I taught a transgender student for a couple of years. He was not good at Japanese but always came in with a big smile and at least pretended to try. Years later, he sent me an email acknowledging how poor his Japanese had been and saying that my classroom had been a safe haven for him during those 2 years when he felt he could be himself. I have had a handful of moments like this while teaching, but to me there is no better compliment than knowing I managed to make my classroom feel safe and inclusive for a student who was really struggling at the time. Story 166. I received notes from passengers praising me for being a good and kind bus driver. In my last job, complaints were filed with the manager because I was doing my job. He explained that this was one of the most important parts of my role and that the complaints only proved I was doing it correctly. I also handled upselling at the petrol station. Story 167. At my second job, I worked in retail when I was 16. My boss said that when she had to leave the sales floor to go to the back while I was working, she did not have to worry. She knew I was competent enough to keep things running while she was gone and would only come back if something happened that was beyond my authority and that only she could handle. Story 168. I worked at the sheriff's office and was in my late 20s. I also served on our volunteer ambulance crew. One day, as I was getting ready to go on the road, I was called to the front desk of the sheriff's department. As I entered the lobby, a blonde woman ran up, kissed me, and thanked me for saving her father's life. I could not think who she was and asked if she was sure it was me. She said yes and explained how she had known to ask for me. After that, I earned the nickname the Polish Prince until I left the department. Story 169. I hear nothing, and I am left alone. No news is good news. Story 170. You're showing off your sexy legs today. I'm a man too. My first thought was that this was a bit uncomfortable. I instantly realized this is probably how women feel when they are hit on by someone they are not attracted to, so I shrugged it off as normal. Story 171. An intensive care unit doctor told a registered nurse that their notes were excellent. Story 172. My lead engineer came over to my desk and said he had the most realistic dream of his life. In the dream, he was boarding a plane with his family to visit his parents. The flight attendant asked him to fly the plane because the captain could not make it. He protested that he was not a pilot but went to the cockpit anyway. There he found me as the co-pilot, which reassured him. We successfully took off. The landing was rough and resulted in some wing damage. Despite that, the flight was a success because no one died. I took it as a compliment for a job well done. Story 173. I have a sticky note on my fridge from an old colleague who praised me for handling a fire evacuation calmly and efficiently and for getting back on track afterward. As someone who has had terrible luck with emergencies during shifts and who experiences a lot of anxiety about them, this really stood out to me. Story 174. You were my mentor. Even when it was hard, you helped me grow. Story 175. When I left my job as a kitchen manager, all of my coworkers told me to stay and said I was the best manager they had ever worked with. A few months later, I got a call from the regional manager asking me to come back. I had left because of a lack of recognition for my hard work. Both the general manager and the regional manager decided to withhold praise to keep me working more than 80 hours a week, and neither told me that my food cost, labor, turnover, and other performance metrics were consistently the best in the company. To think, just one word of praise, such as an attaboy or kudos, would have kept me there. Story 176. I arrived at work during an event and approached a group of people, including members of my senior management and the person who had booked the event, a client of over 20 years who had spent significant amounts. The client looked past everyone else as I approached and said, "Finally, someone who knows what they are doing." Story 177. When everyone was being grilled for having their phones on them, they were asked to raise their hands if they had their phones. I raised my hand and looked at my two superiors. They both widened their eyes and shook their heads. Everyone got an official warning. That is how I knew I was the favorite in the group of 20 to 25 people. Story 178. I was once told I go above and beyond just enough to get people to leave me alone. Story 179. I work for myself doing window washing and pressure washing. The best compliment I have received is that customers tell everyone I have a magician clean their windows because I make the glass disappear. Another customer said they walked into their sliding glass door after I left because they could not see the glass. It makes me feel good. Story 180. I am a staff member at a university. A faculty leader publicly praised me for being helpful. This may not seem like a big deal, but if you work in academia, you know. Story 181. Anytime one of my former direct reports says that I was a good manager. Story 182. A customer told me that my smile made her whole day, and I wanted to cry on the spot. It was so sweet. Story 183. I am a teacher. A student's mother told me that the previous teacher had destroyed her child's confidence in math. By the end of the year with me, the student told me he enjoyed math and felt confident again. This year, he is excelling in the next grade level. He returns to my room regularly just to check in and chat. This is why I do my job. For the one student out of 130 for whom I can make a tangible difference. Story 184. The best for me was a backhanded compliment. You were like an enema. You get up people's asses and shit gets done, but it is always a messy process. Story 185. I am a disability support worker for an online platform that connects directly with clients. The company called one of my clients to discuss how I had been doing over the last 5 years working with her. Her review was so positive that I received a small raise. Story 186. You haul grocery carts as if you were doing the work of 10 men combined. Story 187. At my last workplace, Everyone on my team said I was a high performer and thanked me. My line supervisor told me I was a people pleaser and had not performed as well as I could. He said there was always room for improvement and that I did not deserve a higher raise. When I left, nearly everyone at my farewell said something nice about my hard work and I almost teared up, except my line supervisor, who did not say a word. He left shortly afterward because he could not manage my workload. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.